recorded August 23rd, 2023. Good afternoon, Brody. Good afternoon, Rod. How are you doing?
I'll let Brody go first. I'm always more interested in what Brody's up to.
Brody said, give me 1 minute.
There
So
we
I'll
go.
go.
I can't join a Teams
Oh,
call and StreamYard at the same time. Go figure.
yeah.
Uh,
That'd be neat if it just kind of you were
yeah,
talking on both sides. Yeah.
I've been a huge proponent, separation of duties. If you're trying to do everything on one computer, that's a Brody thing.
I, what I had to do yesterday? I had to take. By the way, hi everybody. Hope you're doing well. I had to take 2 calls at the same time. So I had my cell phone Google Bud in my one ear, and then I had this headphone on my other ear, and I got one project manager. I'm like, can I talk at the beginning of this call, and then can I talk at the end of this call? And then I had to use my ADHD powers to combine the listening streams and try to make sense of both calls while also contributing. It's quite challenging. I don't recommend it.
That's how you become a good consultant.
That's how you become an overworked consultant.
Yeah.
Or a consultant that does one job and
So one thing you'll learn, I'm old head now, is you learn to take the session of your brain and cache information. You have delayed response. So, like, yeah, both because you always have to seem like you contemplating what they're saying. Yes, right.
Right. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I was doing. I was listening and actively preparing a response, something I always do. Yeah.
But you look, even though you're working, it sounds like as hard as you have been over the last few weeks. You look rested for a change because you were haggard, man. Whatever project you were on, they were beating you and hanging you out dry and dragging you through the street.
can you even talk about what you've done this week? That's the
No,
question.
it's still happening, so I
Okay.
can't talk about it. I can't even talk about it last week. It's complicated. Security. It's security. It's cybersecurity. I'm kicking out bad actors from things.
Ooh, like Keanu Reeves.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
Keanu Reeves. Yeah,
Or the guy that
yeah,
played Booger on Revenge of the
Yeah,
Nerds.
there you go.
yeah, 100%. But thank you, Edward, for the compliment. Actually, I was sleeping better last week. But yeah, I've just been busy. It's been busy. Well, like something came up, so like I can't get into specifics, but it's basically like we're always busy, right? Like Microsoft Consulting in cybersecurity is always busy. Like there's no bench. I'm not like sitting around like, Tuesdays I got nothing to do, and Wednesdays I got 3 calls, and then Thursdays I'm golfing all day. It's like no, I'm busy every day, right? And then when your boss comes down, it's like, hey, we have this super important thing we need you to do. It's like, okay, can you put your other things on pause? I'm like, no, I can't. It's like, okay, we'll make it work. It's like, okay, well now I'm just going to operate at overcapacity Brody. So that's all. Just busy. That's consulting sometimes. Sometimes it's slow.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can't sneak out and go golf. This has not been one of those months, which is too
Yeah.
bad because summer's
Sounds
short
like
here
you
in
need
Canada.
sounds like that's part of your next evolution of Brody, figuring out how to delegate so you can go golf.
I Yeah,
I,
whenever possible, Rod, I will learn to delegate in golf.
All right.
Yeah, but you know what? Actually, earlier in the summer, I did have more free time, and I thought I had my whole summer like planned out. And enjoy if you have downtime at work, enjoy it,
yeah.
and don't take it for granted. And if you get some time to go for a bike ride or a walk or
Hard for me.
take an early day, do it because you never know what your next week's going to be like, especially in cybersecurity.
You
Hmm.
don't, but I think we're all generally the same. People that work in cybersecurity or have worked in IT for any length of time. If you're idle, you feel like you're not doing anything worthy, and you make work for yourself sometimes, right?
We call it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go work in my lab.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I almost did that foolishness last night, and I stopped. Like, you're not gonna maintain this. You're gonna get frustrated. You're gonna look up, and it's gonna be 2:30 in the morning, right? So, but early in your career, you do it. And that speaks of the learning generation that changes, right? You had to get into it. Now you can get your job done in traditional workday within reason, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
still learn, have opportunity to improve and skill up. And
Mhm.
the hardest thing I've had to do. Well, I'm sorry, Brody. Was that all? Because you on these
No,
super
I'm
secret
agreeing with
missions.
you. Keep going. Yeah, let's roll with it. Yeah.
The hardest thing, when you get a little bit more gray in your professional career, um, is how to unskill, how to let technologies that you don't necessarily use in your day to day sort of fade off, because we find ourselves still trying to stay abreast of stuff that I don't do anymore, right? Like I was sitting here pilling around in one, like virtualization, right? That's not my forte, but I was, Trevor got me all into this, this, he got me all hooked into this. Shout out to Trevor, listen of the show, support of the show, until this very compact uh, compute unit that can run VMware and Linux and Procalis, I believe the name. I'm about to go buy me one. It is awesome. So, Trevor, I appreciate it. You're the cause of me staying up and working in the night when I shouldn't be. But I put your gift in the mail today. So
Oh,
Yeah, open it slowly. There you go.
get
Not a
someone else
glitter
to
bomb.
open it. Yeah.
Yeah, someone else to delegate.
Get a machine that goes over
Delegation.
like
Delegate.
this and then opens it up and it moves it around, right? Um,
Yeah.
I'll go next because Rod didn't have anything. I was reading the announcement from
I don't think you said that, but okay.
yeah, yeah.
I just care more about you.
Okay,
Right.
that's fair. Uh, yeah, there you go. All right. The new announcement about the certification, role certification, John Savalas talked about on his LinkedIn and all his social media stuff.
Yeah.
I stole one of your things. I'm sorry.
No, you didn't steal it. No, I'm glad you brought that up.
I'll let you have that one. I give another one.
No.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So check that out as you go through these certification paths, and what the new certification model looks like from Microsoft and what they're trying to measure, how they're going about it. I think there's some changes in the renewals and some of the things you do. It sort of reminds me of the way Cisco did theirs years ago. I mean, when I say years ago, when they're, the pinnacle was CCIE and stuff like that. So that was good. The second thing is, there's a gentleman. His name is Somesh Yonis. I'll put his link to his LinkedIn post, and his topic is navigating Microsoft security and compliance product skill map, a guided journey for experts and beginners alike. One of the things that's most overwhelming is that, I ran into a buddy when I had to go to my sports medicine guy, and I see this from entry level and season. Where do I start? It's so much information, and nobody, especially if you have experience, wants to start from the beginning. That seems like, oh, I know that. I can, no, start at the beginning. I told him, I want to go take the 104 exam for Azure. I want to go take this exam. And I said, well, you haven't really did this in a while. How about you go take some of the fundamentals? MS 900, SC 900. What's the other 900, Rod? Can't think of it. AZ, AZ 900. Well, whatever. Yeah. And like, well, those are fundamentals. Don't let the title fool you. You don't know the buzzwords. When you go to take these exams, you need to know the rules of the game, right? And so, thanks, AZ 900. So start with the fundamentals. I know it's hard for seasoned professionals to do. It seems the professional ego gets in the way. I'm guilty of it. I had to go get a book out 'cause I was trying to do some routing today with some BGP stuff, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I've done this in years. So this gentleman, he talks about how to navigate the Microsoft security uh, product line from a skilling perspective. So I'm just going to post it here. I know the link looks awful, but
That's gross.
Oh, what a ugly link.
It's all right. I got it captured already. I'll grab it.
All right, Rod will make it a nice link.
No, I stopped doing that.
Oh, why? Did you run out of letters in the alphabet to
No, for
redirect?
reasons. For reasons.
Reasons. Were you getting charged for redirect? What's going on, Rod? It's the reason.
Well, I was paying for it personally anyway.
Mm.
But because I was so good at it, they wanted to charge me more. So
they should charge you less because you're doing it in bulk.
I'm going to create my own solution for that. So.
Well, there you go.
Okay. All right, sweet.
That's it
Sweet.
for me, guys.
So net on this certification thing. So can I just read out the bullet points because I forgot to read this? Here's what you need to know. You will have access to everything in the learn.microsoft.com domain, except question and answers and your profile. Okay. Extra time will not be added. So I'm guessing that's still 120, 90 minutes, 90 minutes.
So jump back for just a second.
Oh, sorry.
Before you read the bullets, the actual announcement is that there's now in the exams, there's a little button down at the bottom where you click Microsoft Learn for that specific topic, and it shows up in a little pane on the right-hand side in the exam software. Yeah, the idea is that as a use case, because I took AI 102 yesterday thinking, hey, this is going to be cool. I'm going to use this. I ended up not using it, but it was there. And it's pretty cool that the idea is that, as you go through an exam, sometimes you think Microsoft's trying to trick you on a question and you save it for later because you're like, I got to come back and think about that. Yeah. Well, then you can just use the docs to go, solidify your answer.
Agreed.
And that is highly prevalent if you're taking SANS GX certifications. They're open book. You will not pass, right? Because big shout out to Frank for coaching me, co-founder of the show, Frank Gembert. You have to create an index. Years ago, doing the CCIE written, it's short-term memorization, and that's not the real world. The real world is if I'm stuck on something, I pick up the phone and I call Brody, or I am Rod, or I text Andrew, or any of other people in the peers. So why should having to navigate a question and answer, with so much information, you're probably going to be more inclined to not pass, right? Because you get the reading, you get distracted. So it still measures a base level of competency. Because if you go down, basically them giving you the ability to look at the notes will send you down a rabbit hole you'll never get out of. And next thing you know, the time is gone.
Well, right? and in the same respect, how many things these days do you actually know, right? It's like when I was a young person, I could memorize any girl's phone number. You give it to me once, I'm going to make sure that I have it so I'm able to call her. These days, I don't remember anything. These PowerShell commands, these scripts, the Python stuff, I either have a note somewhere or I leave it in the docs and I go look at the docs. And that's literally part of our process for doing our job these days is looking through the Learn docs. So that should be part of the exam.
There's no version 1 or 2 of the cloud. I tell this to people all the time. It's constantly changing. As Merill is going to allude to, everything's changing. We're doing announcements all the time. Things are updating all the time. Yeah, there's inherent knowledge, right? But yeah, it shouldn't be. It's not a memorization thing. It should be an ability for you to solve the problem, or address the solution,
and know which tools are available to you to use.
Early in my day, when networking was my thing, a badge of honor, and you were a badass, I could look and subnet in my head. I can give you the exact CIDR, the range, how many hosts you had. Now I definitely got to go get the calculator, right, to do it. I can just look at it and tell you, there's your range, here's your broadcast address, here's how many hosts you're going to have, and now, and maybe it's because I don't do data center stuff like I used to anymore, but, Einstein had a quote, and it's still a quote, why would I cloud my brain up with stuff I can easily find in a book? That's one of his quotes.
I like that.
Can't burn your brain.
Yeah, that's fair.
Rod,
okay, so Rod, you never used the button, but what this reminds me of is in AZ, we say Z up north, you're welcome, 101 or 102 and 103, they used to be separate, and then they eventually merged them into 104. Yeah. But in those exams, you had to do a VM lab, and you had to actually set up a VM and configure an NSG or configure a resource group, and it would cut you over to like the Azure portal. But the crappy part was that the timer disappeared when that happened. And so you're over in here in isolated browser land, and you're like, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, I think I got it. Then you cut back over into question land, and it's like, hey, you've got 23 minutes, get your shit together, because you're almost out of time. So hopefully when we're in isolated browser land looking up information using learn.microsoft.com in future exams, that at least gives you the timer. At least have the timer always available, so I know, like, okay, Brody, you spent 10 minutes on this thing. You got to make a call. You got to just pick an answer and go. Like, you can't be spending all this time on it. That's my only hope. I don't know if anyone has an experience with this yet. It sounds like it went live yesterday, according to the article.
Yeah, go
Quick
ahead.
question: was the mark and come back later taken away? I haven't taken an exam.
No, it's still there. You can set things up. You go through the different sections of exam. You save those things in that section. You have to review those before you go on to the next section, just like you used to. But
My test taking advice to our listeners out there. Everybody has their style. I don't care how many notes they allow you to go look at. If you're not really sure within the first 15 seconds, mark it and come back to it. Another question may give
Yeah.
you an idea like, that's what they were talking about.
Yeah.
Right? Mark it. Don't go down a rabbit hole.
I know we got a guest, but my favorite tip when I was taking my CISSP was the Kirk and Spock method. You guys heard of this? All right. So you got Spock, who's analytical, and Kirk, who makes decisions, right? So you've got 4 choices, right? Spock's like, well, you can't, Captain. There's no way it's C, and there's no way it's D. These don't make any sense whatsoever. So your brain's like, okay, I'm eliminating 2. All right. Now you're down to 2. And now it's up to Spock. It's up to Kirk, excuse me, the captain, to make a call. All right. Well, I got to pick Spock. I got to pick A or B, right? And you just got to pick one, right? And you move on. And statistically, your first choice is generally right, statistically. And you just got to roll with it.
You're right. I've heard that. We got a guest in here with 2 minutes over, but let me say that we had a saying in the Navy. I'm sure the other military, we should take exams. If you got two choices, it's 50, 90. 50% you're going to get it right. 50% you're going to get it's wrong, and 90% chance you're going to choose the wrong answer. So they used to tell us, don't dwell on the question, move on. Right.
Yeah. Before we introduce our guest, just everybody check the show notes. I have I don't know, a whole list of things, and John Saville's video about the search stuff and all that. It'll be in there. So.
All right, let's get it.
There we go. We have on screen with us right now. The audience actually requested this individual last week while we were talking about some specific topic, and we had already scheduled to have him on because he's awesome. Merill, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, hi folks. Merill Fernando. I'm a product manager in the Microsoft Entra customer experience team. These days we are called customer acceleration team, so CAT team. And yeah, so my day job is to help some of our largest customers implement and deploy Microsoft Entra. I work with a few customers in Melbourne, Australia. That's one part of my job. And we basically drive feedback into the product because we are 100% customer driven, and we work on customer driven priorities over on the Entra side of things.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Nice to be here.
As we were talking prior to the show, and then a little, pre-show stuff. Always heard of you, been some of your webinars. Never really had time to talk to you in this one-on-one session. So I was a fan looking at that, even though that's not my primary. You said a few things. What you do and the product you do it with, but we've had program managers on within Entra. What is it that you do within it?
So within it, in my role in CXP, we do 2 things. One is work with customers and drive feedback. So for example, we might be working on some new features, and we work with some of our larger customers. We actually have an NDA community called Entra Advisors. And if your org has an NDA with us, you can join that, where we share some of the upcoming things. So even before we announce it as public preview, it's sort of a group of MVPs and folks who can know about things early and keep secrets. So we talk to them about new features, even sometimes before we start building them, and we ask for feedback on, is this the right direction, and so on. So the featured PMs, etc., can get early feedback. So that's sort of the customer-centric way we drive things. And as part of my role, I also work with specific BUs because Entra is huge, as most people might be discovering. So I work closely with the graph side and the PowerShell side of the house. I work closely with one of the feature PMs on bringing customer feedback to them on specifically that.
I'm not an identity guru like Brody is. You said something. You said um, identity, and I think sometimes I we talked about this a few shows back. I associate Intra with the old moniker Azure Active Directory. Are you saying is it encompassing of Active Directory now? Because you said Active Directory, I believe.
Yes.
Okay. I,
So it's
yeah. Okay. The terms are changing and becoming into you. I don't care. Is he talking about
Well, I
cloud?
mean, what is it this week? Is it Defender for Intra, or is it what is it?
Be n-
Sorry,
you
Brody has his
if it
hand
was
raised. I don't know why, but
straight up, if it was 3 years ago, and we made the Entra name change, then I think people would have been like, okay, great. But now everyone's gotten used to Azure Active Directory versus Active Directory. I do like the name. I like the whole Entra family naming. But it's just funny now because now because all of us tech heads, we're typing AD and AAD, and we're acronyming everything, and now we got to switch it up. And I'm being that guy on my project. I'm like, oh, you mean Entra ID? And everyone's like, yes, Brody, of course we mean Entra. I just like trolling them a little bit, but so I like it personally, but I get that it can be fun. Meryl, I'm sure you're dealing with this.
well,
it'll
Mary,
take time.
you're dealing with customers all the time, right? So how? Okay, big question. How did customers react to the Azure Active Directory Intra ID? I don't know. What do you want to call it? Just rebranding, I guess, is the best way to.
Yeah, surprisingly, the folks I work with are sort of folks who manage, 80,000, 100,000, 200,000 seats, and like their role is just working in identity. They actually like this because it gives them it's a niche, right? So now you have a product like Entra, and it's not just identity because their role is so important as part of the organization. And people think it's just a directory service, like they're just looking after users and groups, and like what's in that. uh, but now it is a whole umbrella, like you really understand the breadth of the product and what their role is in the organization. And we're expanding into sort of the whole SSE side of things with the zero trust and so on. So, and all of that comes down to the conditional access policies that basically are the gateway to everything in the organization. So they play a critical role. So the folks I speak with, yes, see the name change, but they also see that the future growth of, like, even for their own careers in terms of what this means for them. It's not just a small sliver called identity. It's identity is becoming like the central control plane for the entire organization. So they're at the front of the door, keeping bad folks out.
Well, and I think in that respect, in some ways, I don't, people that are kind of outside the Microsoft circle or whatever, the little family circle, customers and things, they don't realize by giving AD or whatever Intra its own name, it shows commitment to that product line and that product. So they're going to get their own budget, they're going to get their own everything. So there is a huge commitment behind it, and that's what that shows, I think.
Absolutely. And even for me, I started intra.news. Like before that, I could have said aad.news and like it wouldn't have been that catchy, right? And it shows in terms of like there is sort of that North Star of, everything that it encompasses.
With Intra and the different aspects of the capabilities, you said something that made me actually go back and start at the fundamentals, that conditional access is so pivotal now, right? Almost everything you're doing it's conditional, can be synonymous with scenario, right? Scenario access, like who, what, when, where, why, and how.
Yes.
In that development, do you work with a lot of that development of the idea, the technology, the use cases around conditional access?
Yes. So in my day jobs, I'm part of a few different business units. So I mentioned Graph and PowerShell is one thing. Right now, I'm also working on, like, you might think of conditional access as like one small thing, but there's like an army of folks working on each different toggle that you see. Like we've simplified it a lot, made it really simple, and that's one reason people love conditional access. It doesn't feel daunting for them. They just turn some checkboxes on and it's good. But behind the scenes, there's so much that happens with on those things, right? It might just be a checkbox saying continuous access evaluation or hybrid join, just a checkbox. but behind the scenes, there's this whole device auth and certificates being exchanged and a high level of trust being established. And like there are so many things that we are building on that. And with the new SSC side of things, previously it used to be just web applications that you could do with conditional access. Now you can bring that into anything on-prem. You can say, hey, you're accessing this on-prem SAP client or thick desktop client. I want you to do conditional access there, do MFA there before you can access that on-prem app. So now you bring that control plane right down to that person's desktop, and you can decide what they do there. So that's it's just going to grow bigger and bigger over the
So
many years to come.
if 6 months down the line, I hear this big announcement, Microsoft is proud to present scenario-based access. Better get some credit. Right? Scenario-based access, because that's the thing. A condition does not necessarily be a scenario. Scenario can include conditions, but condition can't necessarily include a scenario, whatever. You know what I mean? But anyway, um, go ahead, Brody.
Merrill, you like that? I'm put up my hand. You like that?
I do. I really like that.
I think a huge recent announcement for the Microsoft Entra family is the network access capabilities, Entra Internet Access and Entra Private Access. These were areas that Microsoft didn't have a hat in a. Microsoft did not play in that sandbox, let's say, right? In SASE, et cetera. Can you just give our listeners and viewers if you know, a quick overview of what those are and how important that is into the overall scheme of our identity platform?
Yes, yeah. So it falls under this umbrella called, it's Microsoft Secure Service Edge, so SSE. So we basically bring in control to all of the services that run on the edge, things that run on your desktop. So there are two big umbrellas of the service. One is private access, and the other one is internet access. So while we want people to all move to the cloud, move your apps to the cloud, there's always going to be workloads that you have that are tied to the on-prem world, things that are never exposed to the internet, that you need people to access. And they could be thick desktop clients, they could be internal web applications, but you need people to access them, for example, over the internet, etc. They might be sitting at home, but still be able to access those applications. So Entra Private Access allows you to have your devices and users from anywhere in the world connect back into on-prem to those applications, but it's not sort of like a VPN that you deploy. You can think of it like a cloud-based VPN. But what's unique to Microsoft is we bring all of this and tie it into identity as that main control plane. It's not just you sign in and then you're connected directly to some application that you have on-prem. You can, in conditional access, see every single of those internal applications. If you want to, you can, target separate applications, maybe your RDP to servers. Maybe you are talking about a thick desktop client that you need to expose over the internet. Without opening out to the wide internet, you can bring Entra Private Access to giving that access and apply all of what you get with Azure AD and conditional access. You can apply that. So that is private access. And with internet access, you can do the same sort of thing, but to applications that are hosted in the cloud, like your Salesforce and SAP and other applications in the cloud. Security teams want to know how they're accessing and want to make sure that it's only coming from trusted devices that they manage. So the Entra Internet Access allows you to access those applications in a secure way and have, again, all of those conditional access policies and the control that admins have being applied through them. So those are the two things. As part of internet access, there is one specifically for M365 access that we have. And we know there are already solutions like Global Protect and Zscaler, Netscope, etc. What we can do uniquely with Microsoft 365 traffic is you don't need to now send your M365 traffic to another place and then have that come to Azure. Like there are lots of hops happening, right? So with M365, we built it to run side by side. So if you're already having something deployed, you can still route M365 traffic straight through us, and it comes into our data centers, right? So that way you avoid that hop of going to some other cloud VPN and then coming back. You can route it directly and you get the same visibility that you get before. So that's going to be a way that a lot of folks are going to start
Nice.
using.
And just building on that, I have seen the scenario that you're talking about where it redirects and the redirect breaks, and now the users can't get to their end result, and everybody hates it. And I'm not trying to pick on any one vendor or whatever, and I'm not perfect. I don't set these things up regularly, but it's great that you're stressing how that's supposed to be seamless, right? And behind the scenes,
Yes.
that helps the user experience while still being in a more secure place. Thank you.
Exactly, because people are saying like, "Hey, Teams is slow. I can't sign in," and you have these various things being thrown at like the end users, and they're having this experience which could be much better because that traffic is anyway coming into our Azure, into our data centers anyway. Like, so we want it to come straight to us, then go through multiple hops, degrade the user experience before it comes.
I have a question, and it may just show my knowledge of the evolution of the services. It's antiquated. How does this either start the deprecation, if it does, of Azure Active Directory domain services and or intra domain services? Is that something with that route through direct to sort of move that way? Because I actually was working with a customer and they had domain controllers running in Azure. And so how does that affect that, or is that not related at all?
It's not related. So intra domain services that we run in the cloud, which is sort of like a managed version of Active Directory,
Hmm.
it's meant for a specific use case where you want to lift and shift servers to the cloud, and those servers and apps only know how to talk to a domain controller. They only know NTLM, and so those sorts of legacy workloads. So what we do there is you can just bring it up to the cloud. uh, the domain service is actually sort of a reflection of your Azure AD. So any objects you have in Azure AD, we send it into that Active Directory domain services instance in the cloud. It's sort of like a mirror of that, but your apps can. It was more meant for lift and shift because our story has always been modernize your application. Introduce SAML, better OAuth, modernize your app, bring it to the future, like stop relying on Kerberos and NTLM and all those old school things. But that future, like that's what we've always pushed, and that's why we didn't do any of the other things for a while because we want to get there. But as we get to the last few stages, and everyone who could modernize already did a lot of their modernization projects, they moved their apps and so on. But they're all always apps, legacy apps, where there are no devs anymore on those apps, and you still need to use them. So that is where these services like Azure domain services, and now with private access, you can still have the benefits of Azure AD and conditional access and all of that security tied in to access those legacy applications where you can't, do that work to modernize them. So you can do like things like throw MFA into that flow for an app that doesn't even know that it's behind an MFA flow, but now you have introduced that additional security layer.
Very cool. Very cool. I have a question. I'm reluctant to ask it because it's from the troublemaker of the show, Frank Grimberg.
Uh-oh.
Phone, right? Yeah, Frank used to be on the show. So 1, 3, 5 years before AD goes away on premise.
I think it's
Feel
a lot
free
longer.
not to answer. I just had to do it because
Oh no, we open about it. So in our last Ignite, we actually had a session where we talked to you about your journey from on-prem to the cloud, your journey to the cloud. So, and we in that session call out places where we are not ready yet on the Azure AD side. So we give you a clear roadmap of if you're doing these things, you can definitely move everything over to the cloud. But there are lots of workloads where we don't have support yet in the cloud. We are working to add that type of support. But it's a journey. Like if you're a startup today, there's zero reason for you to have an on-prem AD, right? So there are lots of folks that can just go straight to the cloud today. And almost all of my enterprise orgs that I'm working with, all of them have this vision of reducing their footprint on-prem, moving a lot of those things to the legacy workloads, and move them. And like some of my big customers, it's all published like in the they have programs to move 100 300 apps in 300 days to the cloud. So they have this huge program of work with Microsoft partnering with them to move those to Azure workloads. So in Australia, we have folks like National Australia Bank, Telstra. These are like all major announcements that have been made, and they're all working towards moving stuff off on-prem to the cloud.
Cool. One day.
Well, that's good. It's good to see
day.
people are still doing that. And this is a, I guess this is a way to get them there quicker, right?
Absolutely.
Hopefully.
You get the security benefits early with things like Entra private access. You can start applying conditional access, and then you can sort of micro-segment them and move them away and move to this new world where your intranet is your internet access. It's the same thing.
You're not specifically focused on security. You're an identity. If I'm wrong, please correct me. How do you balance evolution, growth, capability, enhancement with the security? Right? Because as you increase more capability, the bad actors out there are consuming our product. They have an Azure AD environment, right?
Yes.
They can't beat on it because the inherent controls of the cloud will go, what are you doing? Don't pen test in the cloud, right? Don't do this stuff. But how do you measure that? I got to get it out the door versus the security goes like, hold on, before we do this, release this. Is that a battle you have to fight sometimes?
Yes. So internally, like I would say, even though we identity, we are security. Like everything we do is around security, like from authentication, moving to passwordless, and our journey is to move. Like some of these are no-brainers, like moving to 5.2 passwordless. Internally, it's not even a battle, right? Like because you're moving to a better experience, user experience, and you're improving the security posture. So like there are all those things. Some investments, it's very easy because you're anyway improving security, and everything we do is all about security, because at the end of the day, identity is not, it's your front door into everything else. So I would say we are actually like one of your core parts or your core asset in security. If you said, and I saw Tay Swift on security post yesterday, right? Like doing the basics is part of security. Like this is the first step before even you talk of attackers and other things coming in. If you do and get the basics right, then that's like half your job done, because he was saying a lot of things have to do with configurations not being set up correctly. Like those result in where security needs to come in. But if you do the right things from the beginning, say you move to passwordless for your entire org, you basically remove like whole thing around phishing, like all of that's completely taken off, right? So you basically cut off that whole avenue.
Yeah, I used to, when World was known, when we could get on stage and present, when we were talking about security and different clouds, I would start off, and say a comment that would elicit reaction. I would say Azure, GCP, AWS is unbreakable. And people like, what's boo hiss? I said, until you start putting identities and workloads in it. then you got a problem, right? After that. And it's interesting to see how this has changed and be part of it. I've been doing this a long time to see this, but long time. Yeah. We do have a couple of questions, and I'd like to go ahead and make a show adjustment to all our listeners. We're going to make this official. When questions are asked, do like Trevor, put question in it so it flags our eye and we see it, because I'm missing some of them. They're actually a question. I'll read the one from Trevor. How would someone learn more about Entra? What does that person recommend? How to support it, implement it, troubleshoot, or new? So outside of the things we talked about at the beginning of the show, the learning path, how would you recommend somebody start here? Right? Because I don't see a Entra ninja training like the Defenders.
Well, there is, but pieces of it.
Okay.
And kind of add to that question a little bit. If you look at the Entra product family, we've only talked about a couple pieces of that today, right? There's ID, governance, external ID, verify, all this stuff. And so yeah, where do you find that? Because I'm actually interested in that myself. Other than your blog, but which you can absolutely promote here.
Yeah, and it will be in the show notes. Yes.
Yes, yeah. So I do like we have Microsoft Learn courses on identity and the SC. The like I would say the course for the certification exam is a good place to start because it gives you like a broad overview of things. Right now they're working through and adding the new products in there.
I think they
So it gives,
renamed it recently too. It's the
yes,
what is it? The SC400? Is that what it is?
300.
300.
300. Yeah.
Great exam.
So
Passed it
it's
first time, not a big deal. But yes, Meryl, go ahead. Yeah.
yeah. So I like for me, I've seen that cover the breadth of things. It doesn't go like into too much detail, but it's hard to go in one bite into like all that level of detail. But it gives you a good overview of all of the different parts of Entra, Azure AD, from ID protection, identity governance, conditional access, devices, groups. So it covers that broad breadth. I would say if you're new, starting there is a really good place to start. And the Microsoft Learn course, like I actually took the Microsoft Learn course before I did the certification myself, and it was really good. It covered everything, so that's a good place for someone who's like completely new and starting off. um, we are reworking it, so like, you can do it now and then refresh yourself with the newer pieces that are coming in, but that is a really good place to start. In terms of new things happening, there is always new stuff happening. But if you we have our ID blogs and like our big showcase features, we post them on our identity blogs. If you go to ak.ms/identity blog, that gives you that's our product team publish all of the new features. Like there's one today where we talk about user provisioning APIs. It's game changer for a lot of the HR workloads and so on. Previously, we used to only support like Workday, and we used to partner with different HR products. But now we've opened up an API so anyone can build their own thing. Consultants can craft their own thing from like if you have on-prem stuff coming in, you can do so. Like all the announcements, the major ones at least, you will find them there. There might be smaller ones that might just slip through the radar. We launched as a preview, public preview, and so on. But that's where I'm trying to bring with my newsletter, try to highlight some of like those things which are not like flagship features, but would be really useful for folks to learn and know about.
Yeah. Talk about your newsletter there for a second too, because I think that's kind of a new resource, but absolutely
Yes.
super valuable.
Yes, so I've been a fan of this newsletter called Hacker News. I don't know how many of you subscribe to it. So I've been like, it's sort of one ritual I do every week. I go through that, and I really love that format because it was just a bunch of links. Like there might be some titles for the link, and there's usually a comment section, which is good there. So I think it's like Y Combinator, like something to do with that one. But every week, lots of different topics, and it was just very like concise list of links. So I would go through that, scan it. If it interested me, I'll click and learn about it. And I wanted to do something like that for Intra because there's so much, not just from Microsoft, the community makes so much really good content, and it can be hard for folks to find. And some of those are like real world use cases. These are people who are doing the work, the consultants, or you're in an org, you're deploying something, and they write a blog post. There's a lot, like I learn a lot from them, right? Like we build the product feature, but then we learn how it's used, and there's a lot we can learn from that. So and I've been reading all of this, and then I used to tell my colleagues, hey, this about this post and that post, and I realized like not everyone gets to see all of that. So I just became a habit where now at the end of the week, I just put them all together and send them out in a newsletter. So um, it's just a list of links. And what happens is most of the time you're working on something, then you remember, hey, somebody wrote about this, and then you can click through and go there. So now you have it in your mailbox. You can just search for the title and it will come up. And that's a good way to build your own database and get to those articles, because you only read it when you need it. right? So
Yeah.
it's more about filing these things away in your in your second brain.
So this delivers once a week. What day does it deliver on?
So it's Sunday for me, which is depending on where you're in the world. It might be Saturday evening in the US.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, I have a work with my son, so I pay him something to help me put the newsletter together. So during the week, I just tag everything. They go into a folder, and then he sort of puts it all together and helps send it out.
Did you say your son?
Yeah, I'm looping. I have 4 kids. I just need to, make the best use of all the investment I put into them.
Sometimes they just need something to do.
I had 2 sons myself. I like the way this man thinks. You're right. Right.
Yeah,
yeah,
Merill, Dennis asked a question. Oh, sorry, Edward. I'm stepping over you. Dennis,
no, you're
Dennis
about
asked
to.
a question from LinkedIn. When can we start? And don't spoil anything if you're not allowed to say. But when can we start seeing Secure Software Edge for BYOD? That's what I'm assuming SSE stands for.
Yes, yeah. So right now it's only available for devices you manage. It's not available, the global secure access. I was talking about the internet access and intra private access. Right now, it's immediate use is for managed devices that you have. It's definitely coming. That we don't have timeline yet, but we plan Ignite, etc. are going to be some of the announcements to look out for.
Yeah, Dennis, it's rare we get someone on here who's going to give us an exact ETA on a product announcement, but we tried. We tried really hard this time, Merill. So it's all good. So, but thank you for letting us know that it's on the way. I think that's awesome.
Yes,
And
yeah, definitely.
another question, Shoish.
Yeah.
What about on-premise VDI, RDS support, and private access?
Yes. So that's definitely a use case today. Like you can do RDP, and like for example, in Australia we have this what we call our ACSC, the Australian Cybersecurity Center, which is like NIST in the US. They publish some standards on MFA, and they have these maturity levels. They've given orgs, maturity level 1, 2, and 3. And at maturity level 3, one of the requirements is anything even on-prem, you should be enforcing MFA, which includes RDP, VDI access from even if you're on-prem, right? Because people are used to just username password to RDP into your VDI. And Entra with private access, you can bring in that conditional access policy to those workloads. So that's the neat thing, right? Without having support there. Now, RDP, we've added support for MFA into RDP. If you are having a VM in Azure, you can actually enforce that today. And the RDP, the new client, will enforce an MFA, will let you do auth, but it's limited to like the newer versions, and they need to be Azure AD joined devices, those VMs. But you can, like, it's natively supported, so you can plug in FIDO2, and you can even have FIDO2 working in your RDP session as well. So all those bits are there, but not everyone is on the latest version of Windows Server, right? So there are all these legacy RDP PDI clients, which is where private access is a good example. And we have lots of partners as well that have various solutions for doing MFA on-prem.
Okay. Sounds good, Merill. Dennis still loving his answer there. I love this because we're enhancing RDP legacy protocol, legacy system, an excellent attack surface when used in the wrong situations. It sounds like we can put a lot of guardrails around this now with some of these capabilities that you're talking about to allow people to still remotely manage the way we all used to, but without as much of the risk as before, I would say.
Yes, yeah, like bringing all these modern protocols like WebAuth and FIDO2 support, having all of like that's because it's a frequent vector, right, of attack for coming in once you're into RDP into things. So this definitely helps in that fight.
Another question from our listeners, Private Tomsky. Is there anything you can...
Pirate Tomsky, by the way. You have to read it in pirate voice.
Pirate Tomsky. What about that? Is there anything you can tell us, Wabi, about the future of SSC and MDFFCA? There you go. Why you think I put it here so people can read it? Go there. I don't like you making fun of me. I'm
I'm not
playing.
making fun of you. I'm laughing with you.
No, you're not.
Like,
Anyway,
Laughing
so
together.
When we say MD, I might be dumb here. So is it Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps? Is that?
Yes, it is. Yeah, I can.
Okay.
I know most of the acronyms. Yeah.
or the wrong acronyms
and
that
and
other people use.
and
Yeah.
and 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 the fact that Johnny Depp here put the whole letters out. This MDA.
Well, you almost read it as MF. So
And the show gets banned. Gets
Yeah.
an E. Gets an
There you
E
go.
rating, right?
that's why I stopped you.
Yeah, so there's lots of stuff happening. So I can't talk about anything specific, but there are lots of integrations with like because it's just a new product SKU. It's not even GA yet, right? It's in public preview at the moment, but there are lots of integrations with a lot of the Defender family, not just Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, all the other sorts of Defender suites coming in, and things like tenant restrictions. We are working on a tenant restriction V2 as well. So if someone takes your token out of the device, plays it out somewhere else, there are all these protections that are being built into that flow.
So going back to earlier just a little bit, I mentioned when things get rebranded or tools or products get merged together under a certain banner or team, there's different reasons. One of those also is from a competitive perspective. Now, this is kind of a competitive field, isn't it? All this ID stuff, right? Identity.
Yes, yeah, it is very, very competitive. Like if you go to the Gartner research, you'll see all of the different vendors in that flow.
Yeah. Forrester, I was thinking about the report. Was it last year? Maybe it was earlier this year. Vasu actually, she has her name attached to some blog post that says that Entra supplies like 240% return value, right? The ROI.
Yes,
So this is a huge. I mean, this is a huge market. So when I initially thought about Entra, even before we started talking about rebranding Azure Active Directory, I thought this was a great area. I didn't really, to be honest, care for the name, but I thought this was a defined area that we could actually do something in.
Do you think with the enhancements of in the roadmap Entra will introduce another directory SKU level where we have P1, P2, P3, or are we going to maintain P1 or P2 on that? Is you think it's going to affect the way licensing, or is it the P2 will be just so encompassing? It still comes down to buying and licensing. You think it's going to expand the offering at all?
Now you're trying to put me in trouble.
I totally guessed on this. Do not ask it. You gotta do that. Okay.
But so obviously we've already announced new SKUs. So ID governance, there's P2, but there's a new ID governance SKU that's been announced, which you would do like the advanced governance side of things and so on. But yeah, I would leave the licensing stuff to my product.
That's a smart person right there.
Yes.
Never talk licensing, especially for something that's recorded, right? Because it could change tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want, we'll edit this out as we say it live, right? You're starting to see these conversations come up from customers. So this is necessarily wasn't from a show or a guest of the show. Customers are, speculating, rumor mongering. There's going to be an E7 coming out soon, right? You'll go from E5 to E7. So rumor mongering, right?
Yeah. What I would say is like my challenge in my day job is getting folks to use what they've already paid for. Like that's my the biggest challenge. Like you have P1, you have P2, like make the best use of that, right? Like that's my day job. Like they've already bought stuff. I'm not in pre-sales, so I'm in my day job. It's hey, you got these features. You have identity protection. Like it gives you so much to protect your users signing in and so on. go turn that on. Like we can look if someone's credential was leaked on the internet, and we can have them change their password all on the fly without you spending us, like, having a SOC team doing all of that, reaching out to a person, telling them to reset the password. Just turn on the CA policy, it does all the work for you. So uh, my like I would say that's the key thing, to make use of what you already have today, because a lot of folks still don't do that. They don't make the best use of
Mhm.
what
We
they
Yeah,
have a
and
lot of
already.
partners. We have a lot of partners. That's how they make their money. It's just, we, in fact, we had Matt Sosman on a couple weeks ago. He was talking about
Yeah,
how he helps partners. They learn that to go into customers, identify the things that they're not using, and help them use it, because they're literally wasting money by not doing so.
absolutely. Yes, like that. And like, but I consider myself lucky, because that's what I do. I'm not there to sell anything to my customer. I'm there to tell them, hey, like, you are not using this.
Yeah.
These are all the benefits, and trying to get folks to use that. And part of my social things that I post is related to that, because I can reach out to my customers. What I noticed is, like, there's a lot of folks who don't really know some of these things, so I can make these short tweets and pictures and visuals that sort of convey that idea
Yeah.
and help them get into using those things.
So I think we hit on it a little bit, but I don't think we really said it. And I'll say it. I was going to ask you, Merill, why is it so important? Why is Entra so important? And we talked about security a little bit too, but quite honestly, unless you have these IDs and profiles in control from a security perspective, you literally have no control over security in your entire organization.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. This is
Like,
the entryway to security.
yeah, and that's the name, right? We came up with
Yeah.
the name, like, it's Entra. Like, it's your gateway. We don't want to block you, but we only want to let the right people in. And from an organization security perspective, um, Alex Weinert, who's our VP in security, he says that identity is the control plane. Like,
hmm
it used to be firewalls and all of that, but now with everyone working remotely and so on, you just can't, bring everyone in. Or it was just too open, right? They connect to a VPN and then suddenly have access to everything. But now with identity as a control plane, you can go into those granular, you can come up with your policies to say who needs to access what and when they should be accessing that. And once they have no need for that, they can be taken off, which is what Entra Permissions Management does. It goes and looks at your AWS, your Azure, your Google Cloud, the whole workloads, and says, hey, this person has this permission, but he's not using this at all. He hasn't used it. He's overprivileged. Let's go and remove that access. So we are covering all of that with Entra.
and there's so many other questions because you know I could we could make two additional shows with these two questions I'm about to ask. How's this affecting the evolution of B2B and B2C? When those organizations would be a question that could be a show. And number
Yes.
two, it's the thing that everybody's talking about, the new shiny machine learning and AI. I have to imagine some form or fashion you have to address this because if you don't, it's going to give you fits. Because when is a bot is so good that it looks like a human, right? The way it interacts and does everything. So how to detect that type of operation, and we don't have to on the show. I love that if that's going to be a something that you want to perhaps talk about and come on, we can make that a dedicated topic or handle both of them actually. But when you look at these models around how businesses work and external identities and stuff, that's a whole can of worms, isn't it?
Mhm.
Yes, yeah, and that's one where it goes two ways. Like, we want to make it easier for folks to collaborate, because any serious or large org ends up with multiple tenants. So they either acquire another organization and so on. So you end up with folks having to collaborate across two different tenants, two M365
Mm,
uh, uh, teams, SharePoint sites, and so on. So we were established this multi-tenant organization. There's a whole council. We have brought in customers as well into that forum. I think they opened it out and there's so much feedback. So they've sort of locked it in for the moment, but they're working because uh, they're working on improving, reducing the friction for people to communicate across those borders. but that at the same time, that's an avenue that someone can use to get into an organization as well. So that's one where you need to draw the line. So we are giving the access to the admins to control where they want that scale to be. Is it an org that they trust a lot? Then they can move that scale and say, people can come in, go out. You can even sync identities between these tenants, because it's either a company that I own and I know who the admins are, I'm paying for them, they're all part of the same crew, versus it's an external vendor or partner tenant that's coming in. So I'm going to tighten the screws on what they can do, what they can see, and so
Yeah.
on. So there's no one rule that fits all organizations. So we are basically giving a lot more control to all the admins to decide what they want to do at a per tenant level. So that's on the whole multi-tenant. And yeah, it's a huge area, because it's not just identity then. There's a whole Microsoft 365 side of things. There's Teams, there's SharePoint. How do you collaborate with people in different tenants? So that piece is a larger piece of work, because we work closely with all of Microsoft 365 to help bring those stories together. And then it also has, vendor products, like you have Salesforce instances, success factors instances. How can people access their training? They're part of the child dog. How can they access the training in the success factor instance, and so on? So that's an area that we are heavily investing in, and lots of pieces are coming together. Like, it's been a long journey on that, where we are trying to reduce all these paper cuts, we call them, like all the
Yeah.
friction points.
Yeah. And customers are very ingenious and have that ingenuity, because one customer said, I just keep it basic until the actual product in itself has the intelligence to do this. When he's working with external customers, regardless of how active they are, he expires their external identities every 90 days. You have to go back and do everything. I'm like, and he said, I found out who's not using it, who's overprivileged. He said, I don't know if that person that I partner with had that person as a contract who's no longer there, so I cannot have this identity active for perpetuity. So he expires the accounts every 90 days. And I know it makes some people upset, like, I gotta go. So you'll get
Yeah,
over
because
it.
he has to keep his tenant healthy, right? And this is a feature like in Azure ADP and Azure AD Entra P2, you can enable the access reviews and you're done. Then it just keeps happening on its own, sends reminders out to the guests. They either say they want it or not, and someone gets the workflow to approve it. Like, it's such an easy feature to turn on, and you end up with a healthy tenant.
Now you
And
just have to expect people to actually look at it.
well, he has a team that did it. That's exactly what he was doing, sir. Exactly. Yeah.
And it does reduce the way we built it is to make it easy. That's why we are very different when it comes to like other products that do access reviews, where you just get a bunch of things. So we actually look at, hey, this person hasn't even signed in, and we give the person who's doing the review, like, we give recommendations and say, he hasn't signed in 2 months or 3 months, just remove them. At other times, it goes to the vendor, to the partner who has come in, to the user, and they can opt in or out. So by the time it comes to the person doing the review, they have a lot of information. It's not just a blank list of names and approve or reject. There are also suggestions for them saying, we don't think you should be giving these people access anymore because they opted out or they're not signed in the last 30, 90 days.
And for his org, it's not to the point where it's onerous for him to do it, but he also has that particular process tied into his ITSM. It generates a ticket, and you just don't get to go close a ticket with no comments. All right, so he's tracking what his team is doing, and it's not pushback, and because the renewals are not, every day, it's a reasonable amount of time, right? But sir, this has been super informative. I'll admit something. I'm sort of intimidated by the whole security, compliance, and identity. Is so much. I do the easy stuff. I do threat detection and analysis. I was a Sentinel GBB for a while. I'll do something different now. But it is massive with identity and what's going on with it. So I don't envy your job at all.
When I first applied for the role, I was like, my manager then who was hiring me, he said, like, we have this role. I was like, what's Azure? Like, Azure AD is just users and groups. What's so much of work to do?
And now it is consuming his life so much. He got his kids working on it. They're having to do they're having to do work now. I'm like, Dad, do the work. Right, do this. Well, sir, thank you so much. I taking time, with the time differentials to come on. You have any closing comments? Feel free and let our users know. I think we posted enough information how to find you. If you're listening to the show and you're not following this gentleman, you're wrong. Don't be wrong. Be right. Okay. So, I think that's it. One of the
Cool.
best
Yeah,
things he does.
I didn't even notice time go by, but yeah, that's it's been really good to talk just about Entra, and this is I think one of the reasons we did the rebranding, right? We are talking about Entra today. If it was Azure AD, would you have have us
People like,
talking here?
and you're right. The name change elicits curiosity, and they
Yeah.
want to hear it because if you just say, "Oh, we having the program manager for Azure AD,"
Yeah.
it's been so normalized. But oh, it's just Azure AD. I know Azure AD. It's fine. But to say Intra and what all the announcement, this validation, I need to pay attention to this, right?
Yes.
If you're CIO, CISOs out there, and identity is not one of the top pivot and security vectors that you need to be looking at, you're wrong. Don't be wrong. Be right.
Yeah. Well, and if you're working in any other area of security within an organization, you know where to point fingers if the identity is not up to snuff.
Yeah. Well, thank you, sir, so
Cool.
much. You're welcome to
Thanks
come
a
on
lot.
at any time that you want, schedule permitting.
Awesome.
We would like to think we're friends of the show. So if you got any tidbits, tell us first so we can put it out there. We can do that.
Yes,
All right.
absolutely.
All right.
And thanks so much
Appreciate
for
it.
all the
Yep.
comments as well. Everyone's been posting. It's good to see those.
And when I'm down under, I'll look you up. I
Oh,
promise.
yes, absolutely.
Promise.
We can do a 5K run.
We'll do a
5K,
5K.
and you'll have to take a selfie, and we'll post it to the show.
Well, I'll do it. Thanks everyone for listening to
Cool.
the show. Same time next week, I believe, Roderick.
Absolutely.
And we'll have another outstanding guest, and we'll look forward to it. Thanks everyone
I
for supporting
believe
the
it's
show.
Angelica, or what?
Angelica.
Angelica, talking about Sentinel and ChatGPT, and yeah.
Yep, send them ChatGPT. Thanks everyone. Have a good night.
Have a great week.
Woo.